Nneka stood outside the wedding hall, looking in through the glass doors. Her youngest brother, Nneka, was getting married. The third one. The third wedding she wasn't invited to. She could see him from where she stood, laughing with his new wife's family. The bride was beautiful. The celebration was everything a wedding should be. And Nneka wasn't inside. Her sister-in-law spotted her through the glass. The one married to her oldest brother, Chisholm. Instead of waving her in, instead of looking uncomfortable or apologetic, she simply turned away. Like Nneka was invisible. Like she didn't deserve to exist in that room. A passing guest, someone Nneka recognized from university, glanced at her standing alone in the corridor and quickly looked away. Shame, maybe. Or awkwardness. Or the particular sting of witnessing someone else's humiliation. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a clerical error. It wasn't a misunderstanding. The invitation had been deliberately withheld. And when Nneka had called Nneka 3 days before the wedding to ask if there was a mix-up, he'd said, "Nneni, it's complicated. Just don't come. It will be easier for everyone." Easier for everyone. Nneka had paid for Nneka's primary school education. She'd worked 3 jobs as a teenager to afford his uniforms, his books, his school fees when their mother couldn't. She'd woken up at 4 in the morning to pack his lunch. She'd helped him with his homework. She'd been there when he cried about bullying at school. She'd made him believe he was worth something. And now he was inside a beautiful hall with beautiful people, celebrating the most important day of his life, and he didn't want her there. But nobody in that hall understood what had really happened. Nobody knew the price Nneka had paid. Nobody knew that she had given everything to get 3 boys on their feet, and now those 3 boys had agreed, silently, without saying it out loud, that she was an embarrassment they no longer needed to carry. And before this night ended, Nneka would finally understand the deepest wound of all, that sometimes the people you sacrifice for aren't ungrateful because they're bad. They are ungrateful because your sacrifice made them forget what struggle feels like. Let me take you back to 2005. To a house in Surulere, Lagos. A 2-bedroom bungalow with a zinc roof that rattled when it rained. The kind of house where you could hear the neighbors arguing through the walls, where water came out brown when you turned on the tap in the morning, where the electricity worked maybe 4 hours a day. Nneka was 16 years old. She had 3 brothers. Chisholm was 13, Ikechukwu was 11, and Nneka was just 8. Their father had left 3 years before. Nobody really talked about it, but everyone understood. He'd gone to find work in Port Harcourt and found another family instead. There was no dramatic goodbye. He just stopped coming home. Their mother, Mama Nneka, worked as a seamstress. She sat in a small shop in Yoba, sewing for wealthy women, earning just enough to keep them from starving. She brought home maybe 15,000 naira a month. The rent alone was 9,000. The math didn't work. It had never worked. But somehow, their mother made it work anyway. She did this thing where she would skip meals so the children could eat. She would wear the same dress for 3 years. She would smile while her hands shook from exhaustion. Nneka understood before she was old enough to have the words for it. Her mother was slowly destroying herself to keep them alive. When Nneka was 16, her mother had a conversation with her. Not with all the children. Just Nneka. They sat on the mat in the living room, and her mother took her hands. "Your brothers will need you," her mother said. "I know this isn't fair. I know I shouldn't be asking this of you. But your brothers will need you to become the mother I can't be, the father that left, the structure that holds them together. Can you do that?" Nneka was 16. She was still a child. But she nodded. Within 3 months, she'd stopped her own schooling. She'd been a good student. Teachers had talked about university, about options. But there was no option now. She got a job at a supermarket in VI, working the morning shift before school and the evening shift after. She made 8,000 naira a month. She gave most of it to her mother. She woke up at 4:30 every morning. She packed lunches for her brothers. She helped them with homework. She braided their hair. She made sure they knew they were loved, even though it looked like the world didn't. And she made a vow, Her brothers would go to good schools. They would have the education she gave up. They would become something bigger than their circumstances. This was her mission. This was why she was alive. By 19, Nneka had saved enough for Chisholm's secondary school entrance exam fees. By 22, she'd put Ikechukwu through his entire secondary school education by working as a house help in Lekki 3 days a week, cleaning homes for women who had everything while her own mother had nothing. Her brothers began to excel. Chisholm got into a good university. So did Ikechukwu. And Nneka, when his time came, got admitted to the most competitive school in Lagos. Their teachers called her mother to compliment her parenting. Her mother accepted the praise quietly, knowing the truth, everything her children had achieved, they owed to a daughter who'd already given them the better part of herself. This is the part nobody celebrates. By the time Nneka was 25, she had spent nearly a decade of her young life in service to 3 boys. She had not gone to university. She had not had a serious relationship because what man wants to date a woman who gives everything she makes to her family? She had not traveled. She had not dreamed. She had become, simply, a vehicle for her brother's success. But she didn't feel victimized. At least, not at first. She felt noble. She felt like she was part of something sacred, the woman in a family who holds everyone together so they can rise. This felt like purpose. Her brothers started to change. In small ways at first. When Chisholm got admitted to university, he stopped asking her about her day. When Ikechukwu started hanging around with wealthier friends, he became embarrassed to introduce her. When Nneka got into his dream school, he would make excuses when she tried to help him celebrate. "You don't have to come to the school events," Nneka said when she offered to attend his orientation. "Your English isn't that good. It might be embarrassing." She was 32 years old, and her baby brother, who she'd literally built from nothing, was telling her not to show up because she was embarrassing. By then, all 3 of them were in university. And they had moved into this unspoken agreement. Nneka was no longer their sister. She was a resource. A tool they'd used to climb, and now that they were climbing, they could set the tool down. She still sent money. She still showed up when called. She still loved them with a ferocity that was almost violent. But they had stopped looking at her when she spoke. They had stopped introducing her to their friends. They had started talking about her, to each other, not knowing she could hear, as if she were a burden they'd finally managed to escape. "Nneka's so boring," she heard Ikechukwu say to his girlfriend once. "All she does is work. She has no personality. We had to put her through so much when we were growing up." He had it backwards. They hadn't put her through anything. She had put herself through everything for them. She said nothing. She just kept working. She got a better job. She moved out of her mother's house into a small apartment. She built a quiet, modest life. She convinced herself that this was enough, that her reward would come in seeing them succeed. She was wrong. There was no reward. There was only the slow, devastating realization that she had built 3 men who didn't actually see her. Who had taken her sacrifice and rewritten it in their minds as irrelevance. Who had become ashamed of the woman who'd made their lives possible. She had become the secret they didn't mention. The embarrassing sister. The woman they owed everything to but would gladly pretend didn't exist. The first wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday. It was Chisholm's. He was marrying a woman from a wealthy family. The invitation was white, expensive cardstock, with gold lettering. Very formal. Very beautiful. Nneka opened it and her heart broke in a specific way. Her name wasn't on it. The invitation was addressed to Mr. C. Okafor and guest. She called him. "Chisholm, I think there's an error on my invitation," it says. "That's not an error," he said quietly. She understood immediately. And then she didn't understand. Because there were no words for this kind of rejection. "Why?" she asked. "Because," he said, and his voice had the coldness of someone who'd already made a decision and wasn't open to argument, "My wife's family needs to believe that I come from a certain kind of background. And you don't fit that narrative. There it was. The truth. She didn't fit the narrative. She wasn't prestigious enough. Her hands had worked too much. Her clothes didn't have the right labels. She was evidence of struggle, and struggle was something he wanted to forget he'd ever known. Nneka went to the wedding anyway. She didn't go inside. She stood outside the church and watched through the window, like a ghost haunting the life she'd made possible. Ikochukwu's wedding came 2 years later. The invitation had a similar message, she wasn't on it. When she called him, he said something worse, "Nneni, I don't want pity at my wedding. I don't want people feeling sorry for me because my family isn't like that." Can you understand? She understood. She understood perfectly. She was pity. She was the thing he wanted to hide from. And then Nneka. Sweet, small Nneka, who she'd braided hair for, who she'd helped through childhood nightmares, who she'd believed in more fiercely than she believed in anything else in her life. He didn't even call her about the wedding. She found out from someone else that it was happening. When she confronted him, he got angry. "Why are you making this about you? Why do you always have to make everything about you?" "I'm not making it about me," she said quietly. "I'm asking why you don't want me at the most important day of your life." "Because you remind me of where I came from," he said. "And I don't want to be reminded. Not today. Not ever again." These weren't evil men. They weren't cruel by nature. They were men who'd been lifted from poverty so successfully that they'd completely forgotten the hands that lifted them. They'd rewritten the story so that their success was their own achievement, and their sister's sacrifice was just something that happened to work out. She wasn't a hero in their narrative. She was a reminder of a shame they wanted to bury. After Emeka's wedding, Nneka did something she'd never done before. She stopped. She stopped calling them. She stopped showing up. She stopped being available. She stopped making herself useful. And they didn't notice. Or if they noticed, they didn't care. She went to her mother's house and found her sitting alone in the living room. This was unusual because her mother was always busy, sewing, cooking, cleaning, doing something. But this day she was just sitting. "Mama, what's wrong?" Nneka asked. Her mother started to cry. Not the kind of crying that comes from sadness. The kind that comes from giving up. "Nneka came by yesterday," her mother said. "He brought a gift. A nice gift. A television. But he didn't want to sit down. He didn't want to talk. He just wanted to show that he'd given me something and then leave. He looked at me like I was nothing. And I realized," her mother continued, "that he didn't come to see me. He came to ease his conscience. He wanted to be able to tell himself that he's a good son. But goodness isn't a gift you drop off and leave. Goodness is sitting with someone. Goodness is remembering who you are." "My children have forgotten who they are," her mother said. "They've forgotten that they came from struggle. They've forgotten that there was a woman who sacrificed everything to get them where they are. And in forgetting that, they've become small people. Successful on paper, but small inside." Nneka's mother reached for her hand. "And I'm sorry, my daughter. I'm sorry I asked this of you. I'm sorry that the price you paid was your own life." "Mama," Nneka said, and her voice broke, "I don't regret it. I don't regret sacrificing. I just want them to see me. I just want them to acknowledge what happened. I want them to say, 'We remember. We see what you did for us.' I don't need them to owe me forever. I just need them to remember." But they would never remember. That was the truth that broke her completely. They had rewritten the story so thoroughly that the truth had become a lie. In their minds, they had succeeded through their own excellence. She was just a sister who'd been around. The sacrifice had been erased. 6 months after Emeka's wedding, Nneka received a call. It was from her uncle Okoro, her father's older brother. He was a man of some standing in the family. Wealthy. Respected. Strict about honor and loyalty. I need you to come to my house this Saturday, he said. I'm gathering the family. There's something that needs to be discussed. She almost didn't go. But her mother convinced her. Go, her mother said. Sometimes you need a witness from outside. Sometimes you need someone else to see the truth. In her uncle's house that Saturday, all three of her brothers were sitting. And her uncle sat at the head, with his wife beside him, and their look was not friendly. I've been hearing things, her uncle said, and his voice was the voice of someone making a formal statement. I've been hearing that my nephews have been treating their sister with disrespect. That she paid for their education, sacrificed her own life, and was not invited to any of their weddings. Is this true? The room went silent. None of them answered. It is true, her uncle said. I've investigated. I've spoken to people in your circle. I've heard the things you say about your sister. I've heard the shame in your voices. And I want to ask you something, do you know what you are? He stood up. You are ungrateful men. You are small men. You have built yourselves up but you have lost your soul in the building. And this family will not allow it. Do you understand? He turned to Nneka. And you, he said, and his voice softened. I want you to tell them. I want you to say out loud what you did. Not for them to pity you. But for them to finally see the truth instead of the lie they've been telling themselves. And Nneka did. She told them about the supermarket job at 16. About the hours she worked while they slept. About the money she gave instead of having a life. About the dreams she abandoned. About the relationship she never had because she was always busy, always tired, always responsible. She told them about being excluded. About standing outside the church window. About watching them celebrate while she waited in the corridor. And then she asked them the question that destroyed them. I want you to tell me, with your hand on your heart, that you would be who you are today without me. That you would have had the education, the opportunities, the success you have now, without my sacrifice. Tell me that. And if you can say it with truth in your voice, then I will accept that you owe me nothing. But if you can't, if you know in your heart that you are standing on my shoulders, then tell me why you were ashamed to let me stand beside you. None of them could answer. Because they knew the truth. And the truth was impossible to deny in a room full of witnesses who were waiting to hear it. Her uncle called a family meeting the next week. Not just the immediate family. The entire extended family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone who could come. About 40 people gathered in his large sitting room. He told them the story. He told them about a girl who'd given up her youth. He told them about boys who'd succeeded and then pretended their sister didn't exist. He told them about the betrayal of the people you sacrifice for. And then he did something that changed the story completely. He announced a formal recognition ceremony. He said, today, we honor Nneka. Today, we acknowledge what she did. And today, we call her three brothers to account for the disrespect they have shown. He had Nneka stand in the center of the room. He gave a speech about her sacrifice. He called her the backbone of her generation, the woman who held everyone up. And then he called her brothers forward, one by one. Chisholm, he said. What do you have to say? Chisholm broke. He cried in front of the entire family. He said, I am ashamed. I became successful and I forgot who made my success possible. I was coward enough to be ashamed of my sister. And for that, I have no excuse. Ikochukwu couldn't speak. He just shook his head, tears running down his face. And Nneka, young Nneka who she'd once believed could do no wrong, he knelt down in front of his sister and asked for forgiveness. Not as a gesture. As a genuine breakdown of someone who finally understands what he's done. The room erupted. People were crying. Her cousins stood up and spoke about their own sisters, about how they too had taken for granted the women who'd held them up. The entire room became a moment of reckoning. But what happened next, what actually changed her life, was when her uncle made his official announcement. Nneka, he said, you have given so much that you have nothing left for yourself. This family has decided that we will now give back. Starting today, all 3 of your brothers will contribute to your care, not because they owe you, but because this is what family does when someone has given everything. He announced that they would build her a house. That they would set up a business in her name. That her children, whenever she had them, would have their education fully sponsored by the family. But more than that, he said, looking directly at her brothers, you will treat your sister with respect. You will invite her to every important moment of your lives. You will sit with her and listen to her stories. You will make sure that she knows she is not just a resource who was useful. She is a woman who is worth knowing. For the first time in 15 years, Nneka felt seen. Not because her brothers had changed, but because someone with power had stood up and said, your sister matters. Your sacrifice was real. And you don't get to pretend she doesn't exist. Her brothers didn't face dramatic punishment. Life did that for them. Chisholm's marriage began to fracture. His wife, who'd been so proud of the narrative that he came from money, left him when the truth came out about his background. She didn't want to be married to a man of humble origins. He was alone. Ikochukwu was passed over for a promotion because his boss heard about what he'd done to his sister. In the circles he moved in, it became known. He was the man who'd abandoned the woman who'd built him. He became a cautionary tale. Nneka developed severe anxiety. He was successful on paper, but he couldn't sleep. He couldn't enjoy his success because the foundation of it, the sacrifice he'd tried to forget, was pressing down on his chest. The consequence wasn't vindictive. It was simply the weight of their own choices catching up with them. You can run from the truth for only so long. Eventually, it finds you. But the real consequence, the one that haunted all 3 of them, was that they now knew what they'd done. There was no way to unknow it. They would spend the rest of their lives knowing that they had betrayed the woman who loved them most. They tried to fix it with money, with apologies, with grand gestures. But Nneka had learned something: you can't undo betrayal. You can only accept that it happened, and decide whether you're going to let it destroy you. She forgave them. Not because they deserved it, but because carrying anger was still letting them occupy her life. 3 years later, Nneka opened a scholarship foundation. Not with her brother's money, though they insisted on contributing. She opened it with her own, the money she'd saved by finally, for the first time in her life, choosing herself. The foundation gives scholarships to girls from low-income families. To young women who are where she was, carrying everyone, sacrificing everything, invisible to the people they are saving. She married a man named Chidera. A quiet man who understands about sacrifice. Who doesn't need her to be anything other than what she is. Who sits with her while she rests, something she's finally learned to do, and asks her about her dreams. Her dreams. Not anyone else's. Her mother sold her sewing shop and moved in with her. For the first time in her life, her mother is resting. Actually resting. She wakes up late. She doesn't work. She sits in Nneka's backyard and watches the birds, and her face has a peace on it that it's never had before. Her brothers tried to rebuild the relationship. They came to her wedding. They sat in the front row. Nneka cried the entire time. But Nneka had learned something important: you can forgive someone without fully reopening the door. She was kind to them. She was civil. She was the bigger person. But they were never again the center of her life. That center was now occupied by herself. Her own happiness. Her own dreams. And that was the real victory. Not that they finally saw her, but that she finally saw herself. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in Nneka, if you're the one holding the family together, if you're the one sacrificing in silence, if you're the one everyone takes for granted, I want to tell you something. The people you lift up don't have to remember what you did. But you have to remember. You have to honor yourself the way they should be honoring you. Because if you don't, you'll spend your whole life invisible to the people who matter most, and that includes yourself. Sacrifice is beautiful. Sacrifice is noble. But sacrifice that requires you to disappear isn't sacrifice, it's erasure. And you're worth too much to erase yourself for anyone. The women who hold families up are the strongest people alive. But strength isn't measured by what you give. It's measured by what you keep for yourself. By the dreams you don't abandon. By the relationships you maintain with people who see you. By the life you build that's about your own happiness, not someone else's success. Nneka didn't win because her brothers finally saw her. She won because she finally stopped waiting for them to. She built a life so full of purpose and love that whether they showed up or not became irrelevant. That's the victory. So if you're carrying someone right now, if you're the sacrifice maker in your family, I want you to know, it's okay to put them down. It's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to say, I am enough. My life is enough. My dreams matter too. The people worth keeping will stay. The people who leave when you stop serving them were never actually there for you anyway. And the people you build a real life with are the ones who stay because they see you, not what you can do for them, but who you are. That's the story Nneka learned. And it might be the story you need to learn too.